So, hello everyone and a warm welcome to our session on establishing and funding in Vienna, Austria. Um, the session is also going to be streamed for our online international guests. And therefore, we would like to ask you actually, in case you have gotten questions, please put them through Slido. So here's the code for Slido. So that way I get to see them and we hopefully will have lots of questions from the audience here as well as from the online audience. So a warm welcome again from my side. My name is Birgit Reiter. I'm from the Austrian Business Agency. ABA is the national business location agency belonging to the Austrian Ministry of Digital and Economic Affairs and often are the first point of contact for the international founders. And so I have the honor here today to actually moderate this masterclass. For those of you who have already listened to the main stage before, we already elaborated a little bit on why Austria, why Vienna. Now in this masterclass, we actually want to go deeper into the topic of what does it take to establish here and what's available also for international startups here in Austria with regards to funding. And in order to do so, I have the great pleasure to welcome here today with me a couple of panelists. First of all, Markus Meyerhofer from Viernect. Viernect is a South Korean scale-up that already 2 years ago about.
Exactly, 2020, we've established our company here in Vienna, Austria.
Please speak into them.
The microphones are not working, so they're working? Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we've been established. We have established ourselves here in Vienna in 2020, and we're a South Korean company, as already mentioned, and we focus on AR solutions, in particular for the industrial applications. So thank you for having me.
Warm welcome and thanks for being here today. And then we have invited the representatives of the funding agencies. And I will start here in logical order for me, I'd say. First of all, there is Austria Wirtschaftsservice, AWS, not to be confused with Amazon Web Services. AWS in Austria means funding. Markus Fuhrmann is joining us here. Thank you very much. Then we have gotten here also Werner Müller from the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, FGG.
Thank you for inviting us.
Wonderful. Those are the two agencies at the national level, and they get their funding pockets from the national government. Austria being a very federal system, we also have regional economic development agencies, and those also offer funding. And in the case of Vienna, Vienna being the capital but also a region, it's actually the Vienna Business Agency that's owned by the city. And here today we have with us Vanja Bernauer from the Vienna Business Agency Funding Department, and she will also tell us more about what's available for those companies that establish in Vienna. So thanks everyone for joining. And now I'm going to sit down so I can also perhaps enjoy this. Let me perhaps actually say also a few words more about ABA. As international founders, in the very early stage, you probably evaluate various locations. And this is, I think, where ABA can be of assistance. What do we offer? We don't offer any funding. Sorry, I have to disappoint you. All what ABA is offering is cost-free support and service. In the very early stage, when it is about comparing locations, when it's about perhaps getting comparative information on costs, such as labor costs, such as taxes, such as what are the framework conditions for my specific business model, what are required licenses, and these sort of questions. This is where we come in and help you get the answers to those in order for you to help you to come to an informed location decision. And so what we here offer, often jointly with the regional agencies, is then also helping you explore the business location and the startup location. And as government agency at the national level, I think we have a good overview to guide you on the overall ecosystem here in Austria. Okay, the first thing is, I think Austria offers a lot in terms of funding, but you have to be aware that the funding actually is Austrian taxpayers' money. So the funding agencies, they have to ensure that there is actually also value added in Austria. The budget that they get from the government, hopefully at one point in the future, will actually also create tax income in the future. So therefore, the first step, of course, is that in order to be eligible to apply for funding in Austria, you have to establish a company here. And this brings me actually to Vienna, because Vienna, South Korean scale-up, they went through the process of actually making the location decision. They decided for Vienna, and they decided to set up an Austrian company. And Markus, as you're here today with us, can you share with us perhaps a little bit, can you walk us through the steps that Vienna had to take to establish the Austrian company here?
Yeah, sure. The thing is, we kind of started off actually as a branch. So we didn't technically establish Vienna as the classical GmbH, which is the most common form. So we started off as a branch, which I, in retrospect, actually wouldn't really recommend, because that was just a branch that was directly connected to the headquarters, to the actual company in Korea. So actually, only as of recent, we've established the classic GmbH, Vienna Europe GmbH, which allows us to participate much more within the ecosystem here in Europe. For instance, very basic and very fundamental question, as mentioned in the introduction, is access to funding, right? There is that kind of barrier first to actually have access. And also kind of from a more practical point of view, for instance, we were in the process of wanting to rent office space, right? And that actually was also a condition that they only contract with Austrian legal entities, in our case, the GmbH. So kind of from my experience, skipped the branch aspect of it and just focus right from the get-go on establishing a GmbH or maybe other form of legal entity. In terms of process, the way we did it, we worked very closely with experts who can advise on the topics. First of all, getting kind of the base information from ABA. They can, in English, give you kind of very step-by-step information on how to set up a legal entity, and then also get in contact with an accounting firm, a tax firm. They can also help you through that process. And then maybe also look for notary companies you want to work with, because it is a fairly formal process, and you don't want to make mistakes, because any mistake you kind of make will at the end cost you more money, because it has to be done again. It has to be reevaluated, rewritten, and things like that. So get your facts straight at the very beginning, and I would highly recommend just getting some good information from the ABA on how to set these things up step by step, and then take it from there.
Thanks. And actually, we are already getting the first question on the topic of company formation from the audience. The question is, if we want to register an entity in Austria as a 100% subsidiary of the foreign entity, what is the tax policy and how do we do the tech transfer? Well, tax policy is easy. In Austria, we have 25% corporate income tax that the limited liability company is paying on the profit. Make sure that when you compare corporate income taxes, you are comparing apples and apples because, of course, the 25% you pay from the profit. And one has to know that the tax base in each country is somewhat different because in each country the regulations are somewhat different what you can deduct as a company expense. And here Austria is, I would say, bit more generous than other countries, so that lowers the tax base of which you then pay the 25% corporate tax rate. And in fact, actually, the government has already put in place a tax reform. The corporate tax rate is going to come down to 24% next year, starting 1st January 2023, and it's going to be 23% January 1st, 2024. Okay. So, and the second part of the question here is, how do we do the tech transfer? I guess what's meant here is probably if it's, let's say, an international, an Asian company, how did you do the tech transfer?
I mean, so I think the tech transfer basically relates to the IP that might be held within the mother company. And we actually, and that I think is just on an individual basis, depends on kind of what is agreed with the mother company, right? We have now, as I said, we have kind of this little predicament with the establishing a branch first and then only transferring that into a legal GmbH. We kind of also have kind of this question: what are we doing with the assets within that branch? Should we just close the branch and transfer the whole thing? So we have a similar question. What I would think is it depends on a very individual basis, kind of how the mother company wants to handle these things. Do they want to transfer assets into Europe IP? Is only the IP that has been developed within Austria, for instance, does that stay within the legal entity? So these are all questions, and all of them have various legal implications on how the legal entity is being dealt with. And I mean, one base is always for the GmbH, for instance, to have a minimum share capital, right? So there's a minimum amount of capital that has to be transferred into the legal entity, and that is kind of the base layer. That can be, I think, as far as I know, is starting at 35,000 euros, but that can be also broken down. Only half of it can be transferred. But as I said, it gets tricky fairly fast, so always advise with some real experts.
And we're going to talk a bit more about IP perhaps when we talk with the Austrian Research Promotion Agency also. All right, thanks. So, company established. Now you are eligible to actually also apply for funding in Austria. Let's now perhaps go to the funding agencies. And Markus, I'd like to start with you. AWS.
Yeah.
What does AWS have got to offer us? Sorry. AWS. What does AWS have got to offer for international, or actually Austrian startups? Can you perhaps explain to us a little bit the funding programs? What does AWS stand for? And what would you actually recommend for a successful application?
Yeah, thank you very much for the questions, and good morning to everyone here in the room and also streaming. The AWS, Austria Wirtschaftsservice, is the governmental promotional bank of Austria. So our main aim is to support the Austrian economy in having a thriving and diverse landscape. Either ecosystem-wise or within startups and companies. So it's mainly our main task is to support along the whole business life cycle. So from developing ideas to setting up a business and to get some sustainable growth. For these reasons, we have like 3 pillars, I would say, 3 pillars of instruments. First of all, it's grants. The second thing is financial instruments like guarantees and loans. And the third thing is like consulting and connecting services in special branches, for example, like artificial intelligence. Therefore, in speaking about grants, we have pre-seed and seed financing grants in 2 really, or in our opinion, really important branches, which is either deep tech, which focuses on biotechnology, information and communication technology, or in like mathematics and natural sciences. And the second great pillar is more or less innovative solutions, which is an SDG-based program, which focuses on innovations in regarding like smart city, ecology, and so on. Within the financial instruments, we have like finance options for via loans or guarantees, which we try to support classic financial institutes in being more eager to support growing companies with third parties' money, more or less. And we also have our own venture capital fund, which is the AWS Venture Capital Fund, which invests itself in thriving Austrian startups with deep technology impact and pretty much outlook for massive growth, more or less. And on the consulting level, we have like a network of 420 plus investors. We can connect Austrian companies to and help them getting some venture capital.
So, as you can see, Markus is the guy whom you have to get closer with because AWS offers a broad range of things, financial instruments such as guarantees in order to get a loan, access to capital, grants, but also consulting services. Actually, in fact, the Connect Day today, this event is also the main organizer is AWS Connect, and so forth. Industry Startup Net, as well as the I2B Business Angel Network. Okay, thanks. Okay, Werner, can I now continue and switch to Austrian Research Promotion Agency? What do you have in store for international founders of startups, Austrian startups?
Yeah, thank you for having me. We're also a national funding agency, so kind of sister agency together with AWS. There maybe are 2 main differences. Compared to AWS, we are giving funding not to companies, we're giving funding for projects. So for the development of a project or service or whatever it is involving R&D, we give funding. So you can come to us with several projects. If you develop, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 services, we can fund each of these projects, not the company only. We give cash, that's maybe also a difference. We're not working with guarantees, so if you get funding from our side, it's grants, mainly cash, together with some kind of debit. But this is one of these grants. We as a FFG, to give you some numbers, more or less we give fundings in amount 800 million euros. 80% goes to startups and scale-ups. And as said, same like at AWS, more or less you need to be established in Austria to receive funding for projects. There are several smaller funding programs like Eureka, where you can partner up with an Austrian company, but more or less to say, to receive funding, you need to establish a company in Austria, and the R&D that is involved in the project needs to be done in Austria, more or less. So there can be done several things, maybe also outside, but the main part of the R&D of the project should be done in Austria to create also like employees should work for the company in the R&D project here. There of this 80 million euros, 50 million euros are from the FFG Basisprogramm or general program. It's the classical startup funding for developing projects, innovative projects that involve some kind of R&D. So it's also like deep tech or biotech, not only, but there's in a way R&D involved. Then we have running also some programs like the Go Austria program of the Global Incubator Network that we are doing together with AWS. We are the incoming program, the Go Austria program, where we bring startups from Israel and Asia to Austria to get an idea how is the Austrian startup ecosystem. We give them support in terms of connections. We give them support in terms of workshops like legal perspective. What do you need to do if you want to establish a business here? That we do together with Philip Kinski. So a company that is focusing on serving startups as in legal terms. I'm quite familiar with the faces over here in the crowd because a lot of them are participants in the current batch of the Go Austria program. So this is more some kind of consulting service. But the main funding is in the general program with 50 million euros. And then we have also other like thematische Programme, that what we say, where you can participate as startup in these projects, but they are not, you have to partner up with others for receive funding. So it's the classical startup program where one startup apply for a funding is the general program. And last but not least, we also the national contact point for European funding. So if you're established in Austria for larger tickets of fundings of 2.5 million euros plus some equity up to 50 million euros from the European Commission, you can apply there, but we support you in the supply process if you want to receive fundings on a European level.
Okay, so let me summarize from what my take is on FFG. Project-based and research and development projects. With those, I come to you, Werner, and you are also very important because you have even larger amounts of money, right?
Yeah, so the Basisprogramm starts from 300k projects up to 3 million K, so up to 3 million euros. So it's larger tickets. Startups can receive up to 70% of funding. So the other 30% have to be covered from other resources, but they are larger tickets. So and we support more or less like 100 to 150 projects of startups per year.
So if in doubt, if I don't know whether I should go to AWS or FFG, how do I do this? So basically pre-seed seed financing for the overall startup. Do I already have to have a proven or a prototype when I come to you to AWS or not?
It depends more or less of the technology grade you're aiming for and the branch you're in. So if you're asking both of us what is needed for getting into contact with us, best thing is you have an idea what you're trying to develop or what you're looking for, and have more or less like a notion of the main questions you will have to answer in a business plan. So what will be the business model? What are the developments you will have to do within the next few months or years? And more or less how you will get and earn money out of it. And then we will try to take or evaluate either if it's fitting within our programs, if it's fitting within our financial instruments, or if it's better to go to FFG because it's more hardcore R&D with just a prototype at the end, or go to Vienna Business Agency because they have other grant options than we have.
And this is now the perfect segue. Sorry, Vanya, that today you are last. Vienna Business Agency, the agency at the regional level, at the city level, owned by the city of Vienna. Can you tell me what you have got to offer to startups?
I think that would take too long time to describe you what kind of services do we offer, because it's really few, not just a few ones. We have also a department, a startup department, which is dealing only with startups. So if you need any advice, if you need any contact to investors, whatever, there are colleagues you can just contact. But one of our most important, if not the most important services we offer are fundings. So today I will present you just a few programs we have that might be interesting for you as startup companies. Why? Because these programs fund research and development projects. One of our very popular programs is the program Innovation. What we here do is we support the development of innovative products, processes, business models. It is a bottom-up program, so this is the really great advantage for you guys. So it doesn't matter if you are working in the field of life sciences, software development, if you are developing new advanced materials, whatever, you are allowed to apply for funding. It is an ongoing program during the whole year. We just have 4 cutoff dates, and we have an external independent jury that evaluates all the projects, and they decide if you will get the funding or not. We have 2 funding rates, 35% and 45%. It depends on the complexity of the projects and the technology grade, what funding rate you will get, but you can receive up to 200,000 euros. The next program I would like to introduce you is the research program. This is not a bottom-up program. We have here thematic calls once or twice a year. It is funding a real hardcore research projects. Okay, it's really far away from the market. You can do the research activities for 5 years. You can do it on your own. You can do it in collaboration with some research companies, with universities, whatever. And the funding rates are a bit higher, and you can also get up to 500,000 euros for a project. The last programs are the Creative Pioneer and Creative Projects. They are just available for companies that work in the field of creative industries. Okay, so it's not an open program. So if you are working in the film industry, industrial design, whatsoever, you can apply here for the funding. It is also accessible for companies, for startups, also for established companies who will develop something new, some new products, new services. The funding rates are up to 65%, and you can get 150,000 euros from our side.
Okay, so let me try to sum up again. Important is it has to be a company in Vienna or in the founding process, right?
Okay, let me put it this way. If you are applying for the funding, you don't have to have an established company yet in Vienna. But really important for you is to keep in mind we are regional funding organizations, so our aim is to support Viennese companies and companies that will establish a company in Vienna and they will stay in Vienna. Okay, so if you have an R&D project, you can apply for funding, you can establish the company here, but you should stay here. Okay, so this is the big difference between public funding organizations, if I might say it so, and venture capitalists, venture capital funds. Okay, for them it's not really important if you are in Vienna or are you in Shanghai or whatsoever. For us, it is very important for you to stay here in Vienna, and if you do so, we will be happy to support you.
Okay, all right, understood. For you guys, however, company information doesn't count, right, to be eligible for funding application?
Or for you can apply for funding. You need not to be established here already when you in the apply project, but receiving the larger tickets we want like the same as Vienna Business Agency. We want that the R&D and the project is done in Austria and also more or less stays in Austria, maybe not forever, but for for a longer period. The project takes up to 3 years, more depends on the project. But we want that the R&D is done here, and also the company should stay here in a way. It needs not to be the headquarter, but it's more like a sales office with one person. So.
Okay. Please.
I'm sorry, just for the interruption. It's more or less, let's speak about commitment. So if you get public funding, the agency, the giving agency expects you to be committed to stay in Austria. Depends more or less on the program, how long this will be, but this is like the main issue about it, and this is the main aim about it. Regarding of eligibility, it depends on the program and on the instrument. So for financial instruments, it's also possible to have just the idea or the commitment to setting up the business in Austria. For like some grant programs, it's the main focus group is founders. So this is like the other way around. So existing companies are not allowed. And in other grant programs, it is expected that there is an existing company. So it's not that easy. Therefore, please get in contact with us. Really important is to get in contact before you are starting the project. More or less, may I start with with the question or answering ahead? But the most important thing is to get in touch when you have the idea, when you have certain knowledge about the costs and the investments you are heading for and the development which is needed for. And then we can ask you, or we can answer you and give you the right direction, which programs are and which agencies may come into effect.
Okay, very good. And just one thought, listening to the 3 funding agencies, can it be that I apply simultaneously to each of you?
Yeah, you can apply simultaneously. We are not fund the same thing. So we are funding different aspects of a project maybe, and we are funding maybe at different stages. So maybe sometimes company receives funding from AWS in the pre-seed program, then they get the general program of FFG, and afterwards for bringing the prototype to the market, they receive another funding from the AWS. It's more about the stage, I would say. You can apply simultaneously. So, and normally we also know, okay, you should apply at Vienna Business Agency or AWS at this stage. So the agencies work closely together and know also the programs of the others. So normally, if you consult one of the agencies upfront that the R&D project is done or the project is done, they say in which stage you should apply at which agency.
I have a quick question, actually, just from a practical standpoint. Like, what is your recommendation in terms of when applying, how to go about this, right? Is there any best practice in the sense that is it advisable to work with some consultancy to help you through the application process, or is it kind of manageable with time commitment to just do the whole thing in-house, or what have you seen actually brings the most success with these applications?
If I might answer first, the first thing really you have to do is you have to contact the program management. You have to contact the program manager and discuss all the details of your project. What is the status? What is already developed? What is already there? What are the next steps? And you really, it's so easy. You just make a phone call or write an email and just get in touch with them, reach out and just discuss. Because what we really often see is that the people read the basics on the website and for them it's quite clear, okay, there is a fit, there is a match, it's a perfect program, it's a perfect funding opportunity for me. They just fill in the application form, they send it away and then hope. That's not the best access, okay? So please reach out to people, my colleagues, myself, we are really there for you to discuss your projects, your ideas, and just to see if there is a fit, if you really did find the perfect program, and if not, we will make sure that you find a better one that fits better for your idea. So this is really what I can warmly recommend, just reach out and get in touch with the program management.
I mean, one thing one really has to emphasize here, the funding agencies are very transparent with the contact details of the program manager available on the website, whether it's the Vienna Business Agency, whether it's the FFG programs, whether it's AWS, you will find the contact details for the program managers online easily. Markus.
May I add some information for the former question? It's more or less all about knowledge. So we are restricted by European funding law. So you are eligible to apply simultaneously, either if FFG, if AWS or Vienna Business Agency or other funding agencies. I guess it's like 30 of them in Austria. But we need to be aware of it. That's the first thing. And the second thing is to make clear the same project can't be funded by two different agencies for the same cost. So this is like the very, very basic. The other thing about having a consultant writing the application, we try, I guess it's pretty safe to say this, as agencies, we try to make it as easy as possible to apply for funding program or for financial instrument. And therefore, it is just about the basic informations you would also need to have in a business plan. So who is your main aim group? What is the project itself? What are the development steps? How would you finance it? What is the business model behind it? But please be sure that you be really explicit about it. So just don't tell us you will do the next artificial intelligence algorithm point, but be explicit about it. What is the features? What will be the problems it will solve, and so on. The second tip, I guess we're always giving is like let someone proofread it, who is mentally capable of understanding the application and is also capable of understanding the guideline. Mistakes or problems or questions these people will find within the application, for sure the program managers or the funding agency will find, and these are easy to solve questions. So this is like the thing I would like to add.
Markus.
I've got also
Sorry.
some tips. So first tip is ask maybe another startup or founder who applied already successfully. I think that's also just a good tip. It's credible for a startup to ask another startup, maybe not your competitor, direct competitor, but I think it's really useful to ask somebody who did already the process and who did it successfully in a way. So asking about consultor or do your application by yourself, I would recommend do it by yourself, because you have to brief the consultant anyway with all the details. And normally we see if the application is done by a consultancy or if it's done by you. And before the decision, there's also first we check the KRO criteria. So if there's something that makes it impossible to fund the project, and secondly, there's an interview or like just a talk between the agency or the experts of the agency and the application team or the funder. So if there are still some open questions, you can we can discuss this upfront. You send your application, maybe you change also something in your application or make it clearer. In our case, there are a lot of technicians involved sometimes in the project. It's also good to have somebody who makes it easier to understand what you're talking about and also check the business side, like the business plan. So that's the tips from my side. I would say that makes it, before you send the application button, make sure that you did like the basic things and ask somebody. If you have some question, ask the program manager, ask another startup founder. You can also ask a consultant, but they will they do a lot of applications per month, so they are not that deep into your project, I guess.
So if I hear you, you want to feel the founder, get from him or her where they stand and what they plan, and then you evaluate which program is the best match. Markus, have you actually already applied for funding?
So unfortunately not with one of the agencies here next to me. However, we've looked into and actually also successfully managed to receive the Forschungsprämie. It's kind of a research premium that also in a fairly straightforward process can be, I think it's 10% of
14.
40?
14.
14.
14.
14% of all the costs you've accrued throughout the year can be like retransferred back. And that is actually a very straightforward process. We basically also like wrote kind of the basic information of how and what we're researching on, and then it's kind of a formal process to apply for that. And within, you have to be a bit patient. It takes a bit of time, but it most of the time, and in our case, it worked out very well. So that worked very good, and I would definitely recommend also these kind of smaller things, especially if you are focusing on research topics.
Great that you mentioned this. Thanks very much, because actually, in fact, this is probably also what makes Austria stand out here. It's not just the direct funding that's offered through the programs of these agencies, but it's in fact also a tax incentive that Austria is offering for research-intensive companies. The companies has certain expenses for research, such as personnel costs or even research infrastructure costs. And in the annual tax statement, you basically put these costs. And you have to, again, go to the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, tell and lay open what it is that you have been researching on. And the FFG has to give its opinion. If it's a positive opinion, then yes, indeed, you get 14% of all those R&D expenses back in your statement from the fiscal authority in Austria. And it, small or big, well, it depends. I mean, this is, the research premium is the reason why, for example, Infineon, German chip maker, but they have their latest and most modern production facility where they manufacture the latest generation of chips in Carinthia. And they located it there because also thanks to that research premium, where 14% of those expenses they get back from the Austrian Financial Authority. All right. Okay. Let's open up for questions. We have received some through Slido. First of all, how does your evaluation criteria for startups look like? How do you decide which startup receives funding? What do you look for? I guess that is a question to more AWS, FFG, Vienna Business Agency perhaps, because you're more project-based?
I think it's similar, more or less, at each agency. From our perspective, yeah, there needs to be R&D involved. The startup needs to be established, or at least plan to be established in Austria. What else? The company needs to be active, so not. And a new startup, it's not like they change the name, so it needs to be a new startup up to 5 year founding period to receive the 70% of the startup quote. What else? Yeah, we've got an expert, a technical expert, and economic expert who looks at the finance. So you need to cover both aspects, but in the application fields there, you need to fill out both sides, like the business plan and the technical part. So yeah, make sure that you have an expert also in your team on both sides. And I guess it's similar to, but add some criteria.
Yeah, thanks. As often mentioned today, it depends on the program and on the instrument. But first of all, there are formal criteria which you need to fit 100%. And then there are some topic-related criteria you need to fit. And more or less grants are always like best of the best system. So which the companies which are fitting the best to the topic criteria and have the biggest added value, the most proper business model, they will get the funding. And since it is always some budget restrictions, it automatically becomes best of the best. Within the financial instruments, it's a bit different because they decide alongside the relevance of the business model and the success rate of the business model, and as well for the payback possibility within the given duration.
Yeah, maybe just to add one thing. When you apply for funding, you are competing for a funding. So as I mentioned before, we have an external jury. These are experts coming from different fields, and they evaluate and they decide if you will get the money. So basically, they will look at the project, they will look at the company. So we don't have this aim like what has a startup to do, what has a startup to be, but we look at all the applications, we look at all the projects, and different criteria must be fulfilled, like my colleague said it. Okay, so we look at the innovation grade, we look at the business model, we look at the planning, we look at the technology, we look at the finances, and you can find all these criteria on our website. So you can check it out. So basically, just keep in mind you are competing with different startups, but competing also with established company. And we look at the whole.
Thank you. One more question we have gotten here is, can you share with us if there is an example startup that came out of these programs and grew with these supports, which is not in the European zone? Any examples here? I mean, one example I can share is Robo Wunderkind. Robo Wunderkind was originally founded by 3 guys, all coming from various CIS countries. And they, I think, went through the whole program. I remember supporting the Kazakh founder in actually being the first startup founder under the new category in the residence and work permit scheme. But I guess Robo Wunderkind received the grant from the Vienna Business Agency. Robo Wunderkind is about robot toys. It's basically in a playful way teaching kindergarten and primary school children how to code by actually putting together Lego-like robots. And after they received the grant from the Vienna Business Agency, they actually started then also scaling internationally by getting support from the Go International program that's available to Austrian companies. And as far as I remember, by now they even got FFG and European funding under the Horizon 2020.
On the Horizon 2020 programs, like an investment of 2.5 million euros, so larger tickets. I think from the Austrian top 100 startups, each startup, or nearly each startup, was at least at AWS and FFG. I think half of all startups are founded in Vienna, so I guess also a lot of them have been at the Vienna Business Agency. So there are a lot of success stories. I said from foreign founders, if you found your company here, so like really you start your startup here in Austria, it's a really good place. As we know for early stage funding, I think Austria is on a European level, but also on a worldwide level in a quite good field. For a foreign startup that starts in Austria with a branch, maybe it's a little bit different. We know from the Go Austria programs, there are several startups founded in Austria, a branch, and then started with an R&D project here, like from Israel, Keepers or Chakratech. So we know some projects, but it's more difficult compared to if you start your startup here, for sure, because then you're already within the startup ecosystem.
And I guess once you're established here, you are considered a Viennese or Austrian startups anyway. So, and that certainly then also works well. Let me perhaps summarize the major takeaways. The major takeaways are the Austrian funding system is great in the sense that there is lots on offer. It takes perhaps a bit of time to understand. Seek guidance in orienting yourself on the overall landscape here. And please connect with all the panelists here and make contact today in order to get it to the next level. And with that, I guess I stop here because I'm the last one talking before the lunch break and the food, right? Okay. So thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.